All right. Good evening, everyone. This is Shanieri Eze of Eze Health Center. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. As some of you may know, March is Nutrition Awareness Month. So we will be talking about eating habits, eating lifestyle, and a healthy diet. I'm joined tonight with Miss Sheila Gallagher. She is a registered dietitian. So I'm very pleased to have this great talk with her tonight. Hi, Sheila.
Hi, Shamiri. Thanks for having me tonight.
Absolutely. So, for those who are new to watching or tuning in tonight, I'm with Eze Health Center. I like to do these webcasts every month to discuss different health topics. I love bringing different experts from various areas of expertise pertaining to health and wellness. So this is our platform tonight. So I'm going to go ahead and get started by introducing Ms. Gallagher. Sheila is a registered dietitian and graduate of the University of Delaware and Marywood University. She is currently pursuing a doctorate in education from Notre Dame of Maryland University. She has worked in the field of clinical dietetics for over 20 years in the community, hospitals, nursing homes, dialysis centers, and schools. She attained her certification in exercise prescription from the American College of Sports Medicine, and she also received a certification as a diabetics educator from the American Association of Diabetes Educators. Sheila specializes in blood sugar control, prediabetes, diabetes, chronic kidney disease, and general nutrition. She also focuses on sports nutrition and medical nutrition therapy. In addition, working with patients, Sheila, in addition to working with patients, Sheila is an educator and works as an adjunct faculty at Prince George's Community College. Again, welcome, Sheila.
Thank you, Shaneri, for that wonderful introduction. I'm very excited to be here.
Absolutely. So tell me, Sheila, how did you get into this area of expertise and as being a dietitian and diabetes educator as well?
Well, I'm actually a little embarrassed that you're asking that question because there's a funny story behind that. I was the worst eater I knew. My favorite restaurant was McDonald's, and I love Diet Coke. So I figured if I was going to school to study something, I should study something that would help improve my eating habits. So nutrition inspired me, so I went ahead and pursued the career in clinical dietetics. After working as a dietitian for a while in hospitals, I realized that my calling was a little bit different than giving diet instructions after having surgery or, the difference really, I couldn't have an impact in that setting. But once I got into the outpatient setting, I saw that I could be more helpful to people, getting them to change their habits before disease set in.
Right.
And I also have a very strong family history of both type 1 and type 2 diabetes. So that was a natural way for me to go.
Excellent. So what I find with a lot of my guests who have various areas of, expertise in health and wellness, it's always kind of like a personal connection, whether it's, having a condition or going through some type of crisis or a particular stronghold or issue. They find that, learning more about it and actually pursuing it as a profession is like the route in which they took. So I'm always, highly impressed on, the reason behind, you going into this area of study. Okay, so we're going to jump right into it. As you all know, we are going to talk about whole foods and transforming your eating lifestyle. So, with the standard American diet, it's definitely difficult at times to kind of stay on track with the healthy eating, especially Sheila. I know you, with your clients, you've probably had quite a few clients who've maybe struggled with weight gain. during this pandemic, getting back on track with their health goals, and really getting on track with a healthy eating or diet. So we talk about an eating lifestyle and then a healthy diet. So what would you say is like the difference between an eating lifestyle and a diet?
So an eating pattern is really what choices we make, the behaviors we have related to food. Your schedule dictates it, whether or not you're able to prep meals or you're eating out in restaurants. So your time factor comes into play with the choices you're making around food. And then a healthy eating lifestyle is one where you actually eat because you're hungry. You're avoiding emotional cues, external factors. So in my work with people, I always ask them to ask themselves, why are you eating? Is it because it just appeared in front of you and looked delicious? Or because you just know it's time for you to eat? Or you're eating because you're actually hungry and you want to fuel your body?
So really getting down to like the root of why someone is eating, like for a person to kind of sit and reflect before they kind of reflectively or reflexively kind of eat, right? What we call, whether it's stress eating or there's even happy eating, right? When people are happy and want to celebrate, they want to eat too. So really kind of understanding what your triggers are, right? Will kind of determine your eating lifestyle.
Right, exactly. Understanding the why behind your food motivation is really helpful.
Right, absolutely. So what are some important ways we can change or improve our eating lifestyle? I know for me, the struggle is like the cravings we get right throughout the day, or if it's been a while since we've eaten and your blood sugar starts to drop, so you want to kind of grab something quick to make you feel a little bit better. So why is it important to really pay attention to these things that trigger us, and the importance of changing your eating lifestyle if you've developed, say, bad habits?
Well, you want to set yourself up for success. You want to recognize and anticipate what's going to happen throughout your day. So a little bit of planning goes a long way. If you know that you're going to get overly hungry if your meal is delayed by an hour or so, don't let yourself get in that situation. Make sure you have a little snack on hand, at the ready, so that you don't get yourself into trouble where you're just grabbing at whatever is in front of you. And also remembering nutrient balance. You want to make sure that you always have all your nutrients on board in a meal or a snack: carbohydrate, protein, or fat. If you go ahead and reach for just sugar, your sugar levels will become imbalanced. And if your sugar level drops a little bit, it can cause even more of those cravings.
Right. So really kind of getting into eating a kind of a well-balanced diet. At times, say if you are kind of focusing on one, what we would call like a macronutrient, right? Eating more heavy carbs or heavy sugars. Is it true that sometimes your body may crave something because it's lacking in a different area, right? So if we're focusing on foods high in sugar, we may still continue having cravings. Is that something that tends to happen?
Definitely. You set yourself up to repeat those behaviors and those choices. So if your go-to is always a high sugar, high fat uh, snack choice, you're stimulating those hormones that are responsible for hunger and satiety in a different way. I always like to take a moment to clarify what sugar is. We really don't have a requirement for sugar from the sugar bowl. That's
Hmm.
what I refer to as like the white powdery stuff that you actually add to foods. The American Heart Association recommends that you keep that to less than 6 teaspoons per day, or 24 grams. So when you're looking for a healthier snack option, you want to look at a food label that says the added sugars are 5 grams or less.
Yes, right. So what you're saying is that it's not required that we eat these processed sugars. There's no real nutritional value to it, correct?
Exactly.
So we just like to eat it.
We
Basically.
do. We love to eat it. We're actually
Yes.
set up by our heredity, our genes are stimulated by certain tastes, and sweet is the first one that an infant will respond to. So we're genetically geared to enjoy sugar.
So that explains a lot. That explains a lot. So a lot of times we want to always kind of eat healthier. And when we make these changes in our diet, whether it's cutting down calories or cutting down sugar intake, we're like, okay, when are we going to kind of start feeling the difference? Another way people kind of measure how effective things are in regards to dietary changes is how much weight they're losing, right? So how long does it typically take for us to like start feeling the results from changing our diet?
It can take anywhere from a few days to a few months, depending on how significant the change is that someone's making. But normally, when I'm working with people, I do see people start to have better energy levels, start to feel like they're doing something healthy for themselves, which increases their positivity and their overall mental well-being. So I see change sometimes within a week.
Oh, wow. Okay. So it's just a matter of sticking to it long enough and then kind of seeing the benefits of it. I know I do medical weight loss. So with my clients, I usually have them do like a 2 week, we call it a detox diet, where we really incorporate whole foods, clean eating. And, it's a little rough, a little bumpy in the beginning for a lot of folks, especially when they're used to eating the junk and the sweets and the sugar. But they're always surprised at how different they feel after 2 weeks of what I call clean eating, right? Cutting out the processed foods and the processed sugar that it turns out we don't nutritionally need.
Right.
Right. And then eating foods that actually feed our body, that give us nutrients, right? So oftentimes we focus on calorie count and portion size, which to some degree is important, but the nutrient content seems to be what really matters.
Exactly. So along with that, the nutrient content, which is interesting to apply, is I ask people to start with that clean living that you're referring to, but to ask themselves, are you eating breakfast? Are you including protein, carbohydrate, and fat at every meal? Many people you and I work with today, they're just eating once or twice a day.
Yes.
So just getting people to eat 3 times a day is a struggle. So I ask people to start from that basic starting point, get those very foundational things in place, and start practicing that clean eating that you're referring to.
Right, absolutely. So this brings me to another question as far as eating frequency throughout the day. So we hear like either the three major meals a day, breakfast, lunch, dinner, or is it good to do like the small, like more regular meals, maybe every 3 to 4 hours, or does it depend on the person and kind of what works best for you?
I think it very much depends on the person, because you've got people who eat once a day, people who eat twice a day, people who might eat a snack before they leave the house, but they don't get a chance to eat again later until like 9 o'clock at night. So I like to meet people where they are. And if they're only eating once, make the suggestion that it's a healthier choice to eat twice if you can, and maybe include a small snack. I lost your volume.
Okay, I think I'm back.
You are.
Okay, great. So, technology, it's so unpredictable sometimes. So, thanks for bearing with me here. So, I was actually asking about whole foods, this idea of whole foods. Um, what is whole foods? What's the definition of it?
Right. That's a really good question. It's talked about a lot in the press, and there's lots of different perceptions on it. But basically, it means that it hasn't been had any other additives added to it. It hasn't had any processing. It's in its most basic form. So I like to use the rule of thumb. the fewer the ingredients, the healthier the food.
Absolutely. So, and another way I like to even describe it is food in its most natural form. Or when you look at the food, you can readily identify what it is and what's in it. So that kind of clicks with a lot of people and they get like, oh, okay, that's what a whole food is. So then what makes a food processed? Like, you know, we always hear about processed foods. What does that mean?
So I'm glad you asked. The United States Department of Agriculture has a legally defined definition of what a processed food is. And basically, it includes anything that's been done to change or modify the food from its original state. And that includes mixing, chopping, heating, freezing, even something as simple as bagging up spinach to make it more convenient for you to cook with is considered a processed food.
Oh, wow.
But it goes from that range all the way up to like jarred pasta sauce or Ritz crackers. They have a lot of additives added to the product, and that's a very highly processed food.
Right. So I guess there's kind of different levels of processing. So you have things like the bagged spinach, which to some degree is processed because there's certain things that they have to do to prepare it, to prepackage it. And then there's all the way at the other end, the ready to eat foods or the jarred and canned foods, correct?
Correct, exactly. And it's important to make that distinction. People don't often realize the extent to which many of our foods are processed. So, recognizing that there's a degree from the bagged spinach all the way to the ready to eat meal. And you really want to go to the less processed end of the spectrum if you can.
As much as possible, right? Okay. And so when, you know, we always talk about like reading food labels and understanding like what it means and what the ingredients are and, you know, things to avoid. So what are the key things to look for, say, when we're reading a food label and we're trying to avoid like processed or highly processed foods?
Oh, I'm so glad you asked me about food labels, Shaniri. I think they can be confusing for all of us. So, part one of your question, I'll answer by saying when I'm working with people on food labels, I ask them just to focus on a few things because there's so much information there to get confused by.
Yeah.
So, looking at carbohydrate, added sugars, fiber, and sodium is where I like to start. And
Mm-hmm.
reminding them about less than 5 grams of simple sugars per serving, keeping carbohydrate to 30 grams or less, especially if it's a snack, and looking for the higher fiber content foods because we know we're not getting, most of us with the standard American or SAD diet, we're not getting enough fiber in our diet. We're actually supposed to get almost 30 grams of fiber a day, and most Americans get less than 10. So, and then trying to keep that sodium as far down as you can. There's that interaction with sodium and fluid retention, which can keep people from getting to their weight loss goals.
Right.
So after we move past that, and then we go to what to look for to avoid in a food label, there's a few additives that we talk about most often. And number one might surprise you. If I were to survey our group here tonight, I think many would tell me that canola oil is a healthy fat. But in fact, it's at the top of the list of things that we want to not eat and not see in our ingredient list. Canola has actually a very high omega-6 fatty acid content, which is linked with inflammation. So we're trying to stay away from that. We're also trying to stay away from, you'll see TBHQ and wonder, what does that mean? But that's actually a chemical derived from butane. We're going to want to stay away from maltodextrin. Maltodextrin is associated with a high glycemic index and higher weight gain levels. So those are just to name a few of some of the additives we're looking to avoid.
I see. And this would typically kind of be listed in the ingredient list of common foods that we purchased.
Right.
Yeah. And a key thing that you said earlier is knowing the grams per serving. I find that people really struggle with like what they feel an appropriate serving size is. So you know, most, I think the what's required now by the FDA is that it does have to list, you know, what quantity a serving for that particular meal or food is. But that tends to be something people don't pay attention to, right? Is like the serving size. We want to really look at those macronutrients and those ingredients according to serving size as well. Is that right?
Yes, Shanira, you're so right. And also with those new food packaging labels, you want to make sure you know how many servings per package. People get
Right.
confused by that. They'll see the serving size and think that it's, you know, they can eat the whole box. But really, we need to be better informed and recognize that the serving is maybe a little bit less than that.
Right, right. Yeah, you can consume 2, 3 servings without even realizing it. So,
Exactly.
yeah, absolutely. So, I want to remind the audience, everyone who's viewing tonight, if you have any questions at all or any inquiries or comments, feel free to leave a question there in the chat window, whether you're tuning in from YouTube or Facebook tonight. We're definitely taking questions along the way. This is your chance to ask a dietitian directly about any dietary or nutritional questions that you may have. So I just wanted to remind our audience. So now let's talk about sugar. Now we talked about it, touched upon it a little earlier. Now that we know that processed sugar is not required as part of a standard balanced diet, we can do without the cookies. The cupcakes aren't really necessary, right? So we can, you know, stay away from the processed sugar. It's not required. So tell me, why is sugar so bad for the diet?
I'm glad you asked that, because it's actually linked not only with diabetes, but with heart disease, heart attack, stroke, and high blood pressure. I don't think all of us realize how closely the sugar is to the heart if you have insulin resistance or elevated blood sugars.
Right. And you know, a lot of people don't realize that. When I you know, speak with my diabetic patients, I say, well, you know, we need to get the blood sugar under control for, you know, control of the diabetes, as well as, you know, avoiding damage to the kidneys, but also damage to the heart, right? Damage to the blood vessels. The elevated blood sugar, it puts you at higher risk for heart disease. And people don't think of sugar being the culprit for that. We think of cholesterol and maybe salt causing, you know, contributing to elevated blood pressure. But sugar can also put you at risk for heart disease.
Yes, you're so right, Shaniri. Here's how I like to explain it to people that are trying to understand it, because it's so confusing. Is high sugar in the bloodstream actually makes your blood sticky, and it causes your blood to form clots. It slows down your circulation. If you get a cut or a wound, the nutrients needed to form the scab and close the wound can't travel to that area. So once those it causes little scars on the inside of your blood vessel walls, and the body doesn't want that, so it sends a Band-Aid over. So let me close that up. Well, the Band-Aid is fat and cholesterol. So slowly fat and cholesterol are piling up in your blood system and leading to an increased risk of heart attack or stroke.
Stroke. Wow. I love that explanation. High sugar can make your blood sticky, and we don't want sticky blood. So that
Right.
is
No sticky blood.
really, yeah, that's a really good explanation. So you know, what are the different types of sugar? So I know the sugar that you would get, say, from eating a candy bar is maybe different than the sugar in an apple. Is that right? So like, what are the different types, and what does it all mean?
Well, that's a great question. So when I think of sugar, I like to emphasize it's that white powdery stuff that's in the sugar bowl that gets added to food. That is glucose, galactose, maltose, or sucrose. Those are the words you're going to see on your food labels, and they all end in OSE. So that being said, we can process the sucrose in lots of different ways. You'll see turbinado sugar, you'll see sugar syrup, simple syrup, you'll see raw sugar, but actually it's all sugar, and it all has those effects on the body that you were describing before. If you get insulin resistance or diabetes, it can lead to trouble with, there's new research out which links high blood sugars in the brain with Alzheimer's disease. It can lead to the kidney getting overwhelmed with too much sugar, causing kidney failure, leading to needing dialysis. So there's a whole lot of negative impacts when physical damage happens from too much sugar in the body.
So no matter what those sugars are or the sources of the sugar, it can pretty much cause the same damage. Is that what you're saying? When it's in excess.
Exactly. Sugar is sugar.
Sugar is sugar. So we do have a question from the audience. Linda asks, how about monk fruit?
Oh, great. Thank you so much, Linda. I'm glad for your question. So monk fruit is considered to be what we call a nutritive sweetener. So it will provide a few calories and may impact your blood sugar, but it's from a more natural source. So when I'm working with people, I say, check your blood sugar before and after you have monk fruit and see if it impacts you. If it doesn't, then it's totally fine.
Oh, okay. That is good to know. Yeah, there's a lot of these natural sweet or plant-based sweeteners, they say, like the stevia and the truvia and all of that. What are your thoughts on the different types of sweeteners?
I think that if someone really feels they need a sweet taste or a sweetener to add to their coffee or tea, then the nutritive sweeteners are a good option. I'd like to also talk for a moment, if you don't mind, about the non-nutritive sweeteners. What about sorbitol, mannitol, xylitol? And I often have people come to me and say, oh, I don't know why my blood sugar is high in the morning because I'm only eating dietetic ice cream before I go to bed. There's no sugar in it. So I have to explain that these non-nutritive sweeteners can raise your blood sugar just like regular sugar.
Ah, that is good to know. That is good to know. A lot of times people think, oh, it's a plant-based sweetener or it's this and it should be healthy. I can kind of eat as much as I want. And that's not the case. It could affect your blood sugar just the same.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. So, we talked about like the whole foods and, eating less processed foods. So a lot of times people are interested in maybe going organic. So what is organic foods? Like, what does it mean when a food is truly organic? Because we see that everywhere, right? So what is organic?
Janeri, organic is confusing to me. So anybody in the audience that is confused by organic, just put it in the chat and we'll get the question out there. Organic is actually a regulated term. It means that farmers are using sustainable methods of raising produce and producing food. Sustainable in the sense that the water is there's fertilizers are not used with pesticides, that they don't use any sewer sludge, and they're strictly legislated terms. The animals are raised without any antibiotics or growth hormones. So it's an entirely alternative way of making food. And they actually receive inspections from USDA certified inspectors to make sure that they're following those regulations.
In order for them to be able to label their food organic.
Exactly.
Is that correct? Okay. And a question came up from Linda. She mentions, is wondering how can meat be organic? And I think you mentioned that earlier in regards to the antibiotics.
Raised without growth hormones or antibiotics.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. So in regards to like going organic versus non-organic, is there are organic foods like nutritionally superior to non-organic? Like what are the added benefits of eating organic versus non-organic?
That's a great question because I hear all the time it's unfortunately a little bit more expensive to eat organic. That's the only downside, because the organic foods actually do have higher nutrient values. They've got less heavy metals, less toxins, less chemicals in them. So the nutrient value is higher. There's less of those contaminants, but they also contribute to when you're not using pesticides, it keeps our bee population healthy, and we need our bees to pollinate our food crops. And not using pesticides and fertilizers keeps those things out of our water supply and our oceans. And then in the bottom line is they might just taste better.
Right, right. Yeah, there's definitely a difference. I know my daughters over the past few years, every year we grow certain, foods in our garden. So we grow tomatoes. Every spring we would grow tomatoes, strawberries, and lettuce, and they'll make their own salads out of what we grow. That was kind of one of my ways to get them to eat a little bit more healthy. Sorry, my screen kind of froze there. Give me just a minute. All right. All right, give me just a minute. I'm going to leave the studio, but then I'm going to be right back.
No problem. Technical difficulties are such a challenge. I know that I have come a long way in the past few years just learning how to handle all these challenges. I'm sure Shaneri will be back shortly.
All right. Back. So, okay, I'm back. Yep. So, technology sometimes. Can you hear me and see me okay?
Yes, absolutely. I was telling the audience how much I've learned in the past few years about technology, going from being in the classroom at Prince George's Community College to being fully online. And I think the funniest thing is that I learned how to scroll down.
Right. It's the simple things, right?
Right.
Yes. So we'll just kind of continue from where we stopped. I know we were talking about organic foods and what the nutritional benefits are of organic versus non-organic, and you mentioned even the ecological benefits of organic made versus the pesticides and the the chemicals that are used oftentimes with mass produced veggies and fruits. So, another kind of thing that people look into when making healthier food choices is, going into whether it's vegetarianism or going vegan, keto, gluten-free, low carb. Is there one that's better than the others, or is it more so what kind of suits your lifestyle? Is it more individualized when it comes to choosing like a dietary lifestyle in the sense of, certain food restrictions or selective eating?
Yes, Janeri, I think it's important to stay individual for sure. I think we lost everybody for a minute, but we're back, right?
Yes, it's a little choppy, but we can hear you okay.
Okay. So I think that it's important to work with an individual. I like to meet people where they are and find out what works for them and try to, like I said before, set them up for success with their goals. Many people come to me and they say they're looking to give up beef. They're looking to eat less red meat, or they're looking to be what's known as pescatarian. They just want to eat only fish. So there's no one diet that works that's the perfect diet. It's the one that's perfect for you.
Absolutely. And I know, in my one of your colleagues, Lisa, she would do a presentation for us on that very subject, like finding what's the right diet for you. And it's such an individualized thing, right? What works for one person may not necessarily work for the next, right?
Exactly. So I always try to individualize meal plans, make sure everything that somebody is looking to achieve is incorporated into that meal plan, and ultimately get them down the path to succeed with their goals. But you're right about asking about the different diets, Shaniri, because there are so many. We can start with just vegan or vegetarianism, and there's so many varieties. There's lacto ovo, there's meaning that someone doesn't eat any meat or animal products except for milk or yogurt. There's
Oh,
some totally vegan. They don't eat any protein from an animal source at all. So that person's diet has to look towards alternate protein sources like tofu, and other micronutrients might become important for supplementation.
right, right. And, one thing I see a lot of, especially with a lot of people going vegan, it's definitely become popularized along with the keto diet over the past few years, is that they may go vegan, but they're still eating a lot of unhealthy and heavy foods and high fat foods, but not realizing that just because it's vegan or non meat product or non animal product doesn't automatically mean healthy, right? Because I find that people tend to go heavy on sugars or heavy on carbs and kind of make up for not being able to eat the meat. Do you tend to see that in your practice as well?
I do. I'm so glad you mentioned that, Shaniri. It's important to point out that sugar is vegetarian. So there's a
Right.
lot of high fat, high sugar treats that will promote weight gain on a
Yeah.
vegetarian diet. So really looking at all aspects of what your food choices are, no matter what you're trying to accomplish. I'm glad you mentioned keto too. That's another big popular one today.
Hmm. Yeah, definitely. I'm seeing that people are incorporating it. Some are able to sustain it long term. Others, it's very difficult. So it really comes down to like what fits you as an individual. So we have one more question. Again, kind of circling back to the sugar. Sherry from YouTube asks, "Can you address what sugar does to the brain chemistry?"
So thank you for that question, Sherry. I'm really glad you chimed in on that. So the new research we're seeing that links high blood glucose in the brain with Alzheimer's, it kind of is easy to understand if I explain first what the body's trying to do with the extra sugar. It's kind of like a poison to the body. It wants to get it out of the bloodstream any way that it can. So it's going to stick it where insulin is not required for absorption. So thinking back to what our body's preferred fuel source is, it's carbohydrate. That's what we were designed to run on. Your body loves to run on carbohydrates. So one place the body can stick extra glucose is in the brain. The body's going to selectively always absorb the carbohydrate. So your brain becomes flooded with this high blood sugar level, which people can often tell me they feel they have a brain fog. They're not as
Mhm.
sharp witted if their blood sugar is high. And now the new research is leading to a higher incidence of Alzheimer's with high blood sugars.
With high blood sugars. That is very interesting. So sugar can literally just affect every organ in the body to some degree, right? It just really can have very detrimental and adverse effects. Excess sugar in particular. So really coming down to, all right, so now we have this information, going towards whole foods, really eliminating or reducing, processed sugars in particular. Like, what are some practical ways that we can try to begin transforming an eating lifestyle in general?
You have to know your starting point, Shaneri. So taking stock of where you're at, what red flags are in your diet that you really want to focus on, setting realistic and achievable goals. An example might be, say you want to drink more water. I wouldn't recommend setting the goal as, I'm going to drink a gallon of water every day. I would maybe rephrase that to, I'm going to drink one extra glass of water every day.
Yep.
You can achieve that most of the time. So making your goals achievable is really going to help you get to your weight goals.
So really kind of taking a stepwise approach, small steps to eventually make these big changes, right?
Right. You said it perfectly, Shaneri.
Yep. So, another part of that is, incorporating vitamins, right? The standard American diet, from my understanding, does not tend to have enough of our essential nutrients that we need. So what are your thoughts on like taking vitamins and supplements as we're making this transition?
Right. That's a great question. I always tell people, if it's not a financial burden and your doctor says it's okay, there's no reason why you can't take a multivitamin mineral supplement. And it may actually make you feel better. So I always say, definitely consider that.
Absolutely. And do maintaining go ahead.
But if you're, and then I build from there. There may be other supplements that people are interested in getting information about. So I work on an individual basis to help them add maybe a probiotic if they think it might help with gas or bloating after eating certain foods. There's lots of popular supplements that are out on the market today.
Right.
That are research-based.
Absolutely. So it is kind of an individualized thing, right, in regards to finding what would be the necessary vitamins for you to take. But in general, like a multivitamin for most people would be recommended.
Yes.
I see. And so things like keeping a food diary, is that something that you tend to recommend to your clients? Oops. Oh, it looks like we lost Sheila for a second, but no worries. Hopefully she'll be back on in a moment. Again, thank you all for tuning in tonight. Sheila's going to be right back in a moment. If you have any questions, feel free to leave your questions below. Hey, Sheila, welcome back.
Thank you so much. I was jumped out of the session there for a minute. So you were asking me, what were you asking me, Shaneri? I'm sorry.
In regards to the vitamins and supplements, I'm sorry, we finished that, and now we're on the food diary. Monitoring.
Oh, yes.
Eating. Yeah.
Food diaries are one of my favorite topics because I'll tell you, Shaneri, in all the years I've been doing this, the people that get to goal for weight loss keep food diaries. Hands down. They are most successful. It's the mindfulness approach to planning out your meals. So you can do food diaries in one of two ways. You can write down exactly what you eat in an actual diary format, or you can do a future menu. You can actually write out what you're going to eat tomorrow and the next day and the day after. And what's interesting about that is from those future menus, you can do it the old-fashioned way. You can go to the grocery store with a grocery list in hand. And when you do your shopping, you just stay on the perimeter of the store, avoid all those little Debbie exhibits that are jumping out at you from the end of the aisles, and go to the fresh fruits and vegetables, the lean meats, the dairies, and then out the door. So when you get home, the only things that are on your shelves are the healthy foods that were on your menus. So you've mindfully planned out what your menu is going to be. So I love working with food diaries and menu planning. I think it's a very helpful tool. That being said, though, Shaneri, I think that people are resistant. It's time consuming. It's an effort, extra
Mm,
thing to do at the end of their day. And we're already all way too busy. So I use a little some of the newer apps like MyFitnessPal and get
yes.
people to just
Oh,
track. Many people are using the Apple Watch today, and you can pair that with some of the newer apps. And in that way, I get to see food menus and food diaries that I might not otherwise get.
perfect. Yeah, that's actually what I was going to suggest. Nowadays, with the technology, I like the MyFitnessPal app, the Lose It app, where they have like the entire like directory of all the foods. It's got the calories, it's got the macronutrients, it breaks it all down. It gives you what I call your calorie budget, so it really kind of helps guide you. So yeah, that food diary, same with me with me doing medical weight loss. I find that my clients who track their foods, that's that extra layer of accountability. So they're more likely to stay on track.
Right. They know they have to show this to Shaneri, so they're not going to want to eat it and write it down.
Right. Yep, absolutely.
And
Um,
Shaneri, if you don't mind, you brought to mind something that I wanted to point out when we were talking about vitamin supplementation. We touched on a lot of great topics so far. One of them was food processing. All of our foods are processed to a certain extent by heating, changing temperature in order to prepare and cook it. And we know that food processing reduces the nutrient value of the food. So that in and of itself could be an indicator for a regular multivitamin mineral supplement.
that's a very good point. So even cooking foods, right? Cooking vegetables, you are losing some element of the nutritional value.
Exactly.
So which leads to why there's some people that do a full-on raw food diet, which I think is another level, but it's it's pretty impressive that folks can do that.
That
Um,
is right. That's dedication.
Yes, it absolutely is. So give me just a minute. I will, I think I froze again. Technology. All right, I'll be right back.
Okay. I know Shaneri will be back soon. I hope that if you have questions that you'd like to get answered tonight, feel free, feel comfortable to add that to the messaging and chat function of the program. I'm happy to answer questions as we go along. I'm just going to let you know that as I'm sitting here thinking of things we've covered tonight, that we've not mentioned micronutrients. We talked about macronutrients, carbohydrate, protein, and fat. And we've talked about food processing and cooking and changing temperatures. But that food processing actually impacts the micronutrient value of a food. And that may also lead to a need for, better food choices and making being more conscious about choosing whole foods. So I'm glad you're back, Shaneri.
Yes, I'm glad too. I
I was
apologize.
trying to carry on by myself.
Excellent. Well, you're a teacher, you're a professor, so you know how to kind of carry on.
Right.
Excellent.
I
So
also am a little Irish. I have the gift of the gab in me.
there we go. You can improvise.
Right.
Yeah, so I mean, our discussion has been really helpful. I know I've learned some things too, and even how to present, certain information to clients in a way that makes it stick, like the sticky blood we talked about earlier, and what blood sugar can do to, or high blood sugar, can affect the body.
Right. I'm a big visual learner, so I try to get tools that help people actually see. In my classes, I've used a pillow, a red pillow that's in the shape of a red blood cell. And then I have styrofoam sugar cubes that I actually stick on to my red blood cells so people can understand what is the hemoglobin A1C.
A1C, right? Yeah, yeah, that's great. That's great. I love it. So, really when it comes down to trying to make these dietary changes, and for a lot of people, these are habits, food choices, food and eating habits that have developed over over a lifetime, starting in childhood. So, really trying to take those steps to change and transform bad eating habits or poor food choices, it can be quite a challenge for most people, especially kind of doing it on their own. Getting that extra layer of education and insight and guidance from a professional would be ideal for most. So, with you being a dietitian, doing this for many years, what are you finding are, the best reasons to really bring on a dietitian or a nutritionist to help assist? And what is the difference, actually, by the way, between a dietitian and a nutritionist?
Wow, that's a great question, Shaneri. So, registered dietitian is a very specific term. It is a person who's followed a specific program, a specific curriculum from a accredited educational institution, leading to 3,000 or an internship, a clinical internship within the field, and passing a national exam. A nutritionist may or may not have similar training. They may have a master's or a doctorate. There may be areas of overlap, but they have not had the same curriculum that a dietitian has pursued.
I see. So it's the level of training and certification when it comes to a dietitian. There's a certain standard there.
Right, exactly. So if you find a provider that you feel you want to work with, it's important to ask questions about their training and their background so you understand what type of dietitian or nutritionist you're getting started with.
Absolutely. So when should someone seek the guidance of a dietitian?
A good answer to that would be when you're starting to realize you're not being successful with your weight loss or nutrition goals. It's just not working. The choices you're making have led to weight gain. You're not feeling well. Your primary care provider might suggest that you need guidance on your eating habits. Shaneri might say, go see a dietitian. They may be helpful with tweaking what you're doing. And I think that recognizing that you're just not meeting your nutrition and weight loss goals, it's time. It could be starting to impact your health. Your doctor might tell you you've got high blood pressure, your BMI is elevated, your cholesterol is a little high. These would also be indicators that it's time to get a little extra help in what you're doing.
Excellent. I feel like that's half of us, at least.
Yes.
We struggle a little bit here and there when it comes to making the right choices and sticking to it, being consistent. That's a whole other level, right? It's one thing to get started with these changes, but to actually stick it out long term, that can be a bit challenging as well.
I'm glad you mentioned that, Shaneri, because a lot of what I do is positive reinforcement and helping people realize that you can reward yourself. Set up in advance with things you're going to do to treat yourself if you get to a certain goal. If you're able to drink that extra glass of water every day for 2 weeks, then that means you get to what? Let's fill in the blank. So I work with people to help fill in those blanks for themselves.
That positive reinforcement, right? So that kind of keeps people motivated and they continue to carry on. Sheila, this was such a great discussion. I definitely enjoyed it. Hopefully our audience was able to learn a lot, great information. Tonight's webcast will be available on replay. So certainly if anyone wants to share with friends or anyone who would be interested, they can certainly do that. So Sheila, is there any way that, if someone was interested, for instance, in wanting to contact you and set up an appointment or schedule a consultation with you to really get some help with their, health goals or dietary goals, how can they get in touch with you? What's the process?
You can go right online to southernmarylanddietitian.com and get in touch with us, and we'll be happy to work with you.
All right, so southernmarylanddietitian.com. I am actually going to put that in the chat window. And I'm just checking my spelling here. So yes, if anyone does want to schedule with you, they can just go online or Google Southern Maryland Dietitian to get started. Now, does your facility accept insurance?
Yes, we do accept most insurances. We will be happy to work with your provider. If you need a referral, we'll be happy to help you do that. There's a team of dietitians available. You can go online and review what provider you might feel most comfortable with, and we'll do our best to get you to goals.
Excellent, excellent. Well, thank you so much for joining us tonight. Were there any kind of last words or information that you'd like to share with the audience?
Oh my gosh. To sum up, don't give up. If you're struggling with your weight loss goals, just keep on the path. The longer you stay on the path, the surer you are that you're going to get to where you want to be.
Absolutely. Great words of advice. Thank you all for joining us tonight. As I mentioned earlier, Eze Health webcast, we do this every month, different topic. So thank you again for joining us and have a good night. Bye-bye.
Have a good night, everybody. Thank you.